everybody. I'm always fascinated the middle of the front row never gets filled. So I'm not going to keep you waiting for an hour. We're actually going to try and start this and keep it moving. My name's Brenda Sanderson. I'm IXDA's Executive Director, and I'm here to introduce our next presenter, Dan Newman. And Dan is the Deputy Creative Director for the Digital Media Group at NPR. A brand new position to him, I'm learning. And in this role, he and his team designed the NPR-branded digital products and services, including npr.org website, the NPR News app for iOS and Android, and the cross-platform NPR One app, which has been called the Pandora for public radio. And I know there's some folks from Pandora here as well, too, so there's an interesting conversation to be had there. Prior to joining NPR just last year, Dan managed the web and mobile user experience team at Wolfram Research, where he worked on Wolfram Alpha 1, one of the data partners that powers Siri and other voice-assisted services and technical computing, as well as the technical computing tool Mathematica. So I'm looking forward to hearing what Dan has to say, so come on up.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Before we get started, can I get a quick little bit of audience participation? What I'd like to ask is, if you work for a charity or a nonprofit, can you raise your hand? Excellent. It's not a room full of nonprofit folks. Good. Can I ask you if you work for the government or education? Can you raise your hand? Okay. If you work for an agency, and if you work for a for-profit organization. All right, cool. I like the mix. So you heard a little bit about me and my background. I'm going to tell you just a little bit more to help give some context about what I'm going to be talking about today. So I came to NPR about 6 months ago. I joined as an interaction designer and then was fortunate enough to fall into the role of Deputy Creative Director, where I'm both a contributor and a member of the leadership. And one of the reasons that I came to NPR is the mission-driven work. We'll get into this a little bit more down in the presentation, but I believe very strongly in the mission of NPR. I believe in the power of radio and more broadly storytelling to make a positive change in the world. That's why I came to NPR. But when I came, I realized that, you know what? Mission isn't only for those who work in quote-unquote mission-driven organizations. You can make a difference in any role, in any organization. And so I want to talk today about how mission-centric thinking can make you a better designer, no matter what you're designing. So to do that, we're going to cover three main areas. First, we're going to talk about defining what the heck I mean by mission-driven, because I think it's a little bit fuzzy and a little bit nebulous, and so we're going to do that together. We're then going to talk about how you design to fit a mission. And then finally, we're going to talk about how you verify that you are, in fact, measuring up to your mission. And if you are, lovely. And if you're not, how do you refine your mission to better suit the audience that you're trying to serve? So let's get into it. As designers, we know that the key to solving any problem is first defining the problem. And mission-driven design is no exception. You have to define your mission. Commercial work against society from the keynote this morning, that was something that I heard and keep thinking about because I think it's a common trend. We talk about how you have to do things that are maybe not for the social good, just to pay the bills, or how you have to do something that is not really even what your company or your organization professes to do because, well, it's expedient right now. And I think that your job as designers is to reject that, and that's what we said in the keynote today as well. Every project, every product, everything you design can be a social impact project. And that doesn't mean you have to change the world with the latest widget or the latest shopping cart, but it does mean that you can find those nuggets in your work that make an impact on the world. And so I want to talk about a couple myths. First, and I think I've already made this very clear, my feelings on this, that you need to design for a charity or a nonprofit to do mission-driven work. And I think that's fundamentally untrue. I think as designers, we have opportunities to bring greater purpose to organizations of all type. There's a whole continuum. There are nonprofits like NPR or like other social media, social good organizations. There's also social entrepreneurship, companies like Tom's, who work with you as a consumer to do something good for the world, and that influences everything they do. If you look at their messaging, you look at their website, you look at the interactions of their design, it's going to be focused on that mission. And then there are normal companies who still say that they are trying to make an impact. You look at someone like Uber. Uber is trying to revolutionize the way people move, at least that's what they say. And their work bears that out. They have upended the traditional transportation model. Now, with any social good, there are externalities. Certainly, taxi drivers aren't happy with Uber. But I think you can look at the work that Uber is doing and see at least the glimmer of the greater purpose that they're trying to design for. Now, not every mission has to be to change the world, as I said. Sometimes the mission is to help people save money. Sometimes it's to make more time for families. Sometimes it's to learn something new, or even connect with other people, as Mark Zuckerberg says. Now, again, I don't profess that Facebook is a charity. Facebook is in the business of selling ads and selling data, but there is inherent good that can come out of the work that is done. And in particular, as designers, we have the ability to bring that to the forefront. Second myth, a mission is just a stodgy corporate boilerplate. Look, often what we think of as mission is what we publish on our About Us page. It's what we say that we believe in and we work for, and that is certainly part of it. But your mission is the story that you express through your design. And it's the story of what you believe and what you do. It is the epic of epics in agile terminology. And this is true whether you work for a social justice charity or one of the technology companies in the world. And again, as designers, our role is to make sure that story comes out in every micro-interaction, in every website, in every app. As we all know, stories are important. As Storytelling for User Experience tells us, stories serve to ground your work in a real context. They help you keep people at the center of your work. And we think of user-centered design often, and that keeps people at the center of our work, but I would propose that mission-driven design gives us another perspective on that, one that is not all about the user, but also about your organizational goals. Because your mission is the promises that you keep, the promises that you make to your users. It's not just a story that you use for framing, it is what comes out of it. It's what your users are going to hold you accountable for. And this is both good and bad as an organization. This is an example of a mission, a story that is often told by Google. Don't be evil, we hear it a lot. And this, in the beginning, empowered users. This gets users on the same page as the company. This gets them to buy into an organizational vision. The risk in doing all this, of course, is that possibly you don't want to necessarily always be held to the strictest black and white sense of don't be evil. I think that our role as designers is to find that middle ground, that balancing act, and bring that conversation forward. So as I alluded to, but wait, isn't this just user-centered design? User-centered design absolutely has a role to play here. But I think the difference between when I talk about mission-driven design and user-centered design is that user-centered design focuses on the needs and the wants of the user and letting their actions and their desires lead your design. I think, for me, mission-centered design is actually more about rhetoric and framing than anything else, but it's internal rhetoric and framing that you use to tell a story. It's how you tie the design work that you do to the greater organizational mission and the greater social good. By selling this story internally, you're able to better connect with your users and make a positive impact. And here's where it gets real. There are two key things that I see in mission-driven design as essential. It is intentional design. We are intentional about our aims and our goals. I can't tell you the number of things I see designed in the world that what I would call are unintentional designs. They are things that, we appropriated a pattern library. We just slipped something in, and it doesn't quite fit, but you know what? It works, so we're going to leave it. When I think of mission-driven design, it's always tying back to that big story and making sure we can answer the reason, why did we do that? No, really, why did we do that? And it's defined by constraint. So in particular, working at a nonprofit, we know about constraints. We know about limited resources. We know about bureaucracy. But I think this is true for every type of organization. There are always constraints, and that's a good thing. You cannot be all things to all people. Constraints require you. They force you to focus. They force you to make sure that you're executing on what people care about, on what your organization cares about. And so with these two things, with intentional design and constraint, you have mission. So there are a few key things I think this mission focus gives you. For the designer, this mission provides guidance on who, what, and how. And I want to give you a very specific example, one that is near and dear to my heart, is the NPR mission. I'm going to read it for you because I think it's really, well, selfishly, I think it's a good one. The mission of NPR is to work in partnership with member stations to create a more informed public, one challenged and invigorated by a deeper understanding and appreciation of events, ideas, and culture. Now, the who in this is the public, but it's also member stations, and this is the nature of our work. We have multiple constituencies, and the mission bears that out. And so not only can we design for what's right for our listeners and the users of our website, but we have to work with our partners to design what's right for them as well. And the what we're trying to do is to create a more informed public. Now, I know at this point you're probably thinking, but Dan, that's so big, that's so high level. How do we break that down into something more actionable? We'll get there, hang on. I do want to show the other half of our mission, which is to accomplish that. We produce, acquire, and distribute programming that meets the highest standards of public service in journalism and cultural expression. We represent our members in matters of their mutual interest, and we provide satellite interconnection for the entire public radio system. This is the how, but again, this is still really high level, and so we're going to break that down even more. For the designer, tying all of your work back into a mission also allows for greater alignment within your organization, within your team, and amongst varying stakeholders. You can't accomplish anything without organizational buy-in. You need people to believe what you're selling. You need them to believe that when you're presenting a design, it's right, or at least the best recommendation you can make at the time. By basing everything you design in those missions, in those stories, you're going to have a much easier time getting everyone on board. And as a designer, your mission gives you permission to think long term. I think in Agile in particular, there's a tendency to get caught up in the cycle, to get caught up in the short-term gains, to look at just the next increment out or just a couple increments out. And I think having a mission perspective means that you're always considering the long-term aims. By framing that conversation internally, when you go off the reservation, you can point to your mission and say, this is why we're going a little bit off the reservation. This is why it's important. This is why I'm doing it. It's not just about you, the designer. Mission-driven thinking extends to your users as well. For a clearly articulated and understood mission, it gives your users something to believe in. And I can't overstate the importance of belief, of passion. Users, they use things because they're utilities, because they have to. But users love things and stick to things that they rally around, and you rally around a mission. For your users, it also connects your strategy to emotion. It makes your functionally complete MVP something that they can invest in, rather than something that is just, it serves a need for right now. This is where you move beyond your corporate boilerplate and into the realm of storytelling. And I want to share one little example here. Airbnb had a great article a couple years back. Airbnb was at a turning point. They were trying to figure out, do we keep scaling the Airbnb lodging model? Do we extend our business model out, maybe having a sharing economy for cars, or maybe a sharing economy for offices? And so what they did is they looked at the complete list of emotional moments that make up the Airbnb experience. And they built those moments into stories, which is, again, the mission. And those stories today guide their marketing, advertising, customer service, everything that Airbnb does, so that they can all be on the same page. I don't think you can point to this and say that this is just user-centered design. It's certainly an aspect of it. But having that greater vision, having that greater sense of purpose is essential. So that is defining what I mean by mission. But of course, none of that matters if you can't put it into practice. So how do you put a mission-driven design into practice? I'm going to look at a few examples here, and we're going to do this a little bit different than you might have seen some other example presentations before. We're going to look at the stated mission, the one that is publicly accessible to everyone, and then we're going to take a look at the designs and evaluate, does that design actually meet the goal of the mission? So again, we'll dog food this a little bit. We'll talk about our own mission and the work we do. So I'm not going to read this to you again. You already know what our mission is. But I will say that we have an app right now that's been in the market a little over 6 months called NPR1. Just because I'm curious, have any of you used NPR1? Can you raise your hand? Excellent. All right, so NPR1, for the uninitiated, as you heard in the intro, is like Pandora for public radio. It's something that we want to make NPR more accessible to people who don't necessarily want to listen on a radio schedule or want to just get quick information that is relevant to their life and maybe not hear the information that's not as relevant right now. So what NPR1 is a series of mobile apps and a web app that actually presents that content in a easy-to-use, skippable, personalizable format. There's a couple key interaction design decisions that were made in this project that I think are essential to understanding how we see this tying back to mission. First, the experience is clean, simple, and focused on playback. Unlike most music player apps or audio player apps in general, where you open it up and you get a screen full of options, we start playback right away. And we take you with zero interaction into something that we think that you will like. And then, as you use the app, you give us context cues. You skip things, you mark things as interesting, you share things. And that helps us give you more personalized recommendations and more personalized experiences. But the key is that, again, our mission is to lower that barrier to entry for users, to give them more information, create a more informed public, and our interaction design supports that. The other thing I want to mention about our mission connection here is that this app was developed in partnership with our partner member stations. And so when you start it up, not only do you get NPR, but you get local content. We localize you to where you are, and you can, of course, change that localization. And we make sure that you hear relevant local news if we have it available to serve for you. And that's another way where this app directly calls back to our mission, to work with our partner stations. So again, it's easy for me to stand up here and say, well, this is how we do it. But I want to look at a few other examples of how other organizations live up to their mission. We've talked about Airbnb. This is Airbnb's mission. The thing that I want to talk about with this mission is, again, the who and the what. The who is people who are looking to list, discover, or book unique accommodations around the world. And the what is that community marketplace that binds them together. And in their designs, both visual and interaction, this is borne out. The designs are always people-focused. So on the homepage, you have the people right at the top. It's a nice video that shows people connecting. But that line continues throughout the entire experience. When you're booking, you're not booking from an anonymous aggregator. You're booking from Jane or Bob, or as I booked last week in San Jose, Sam. And that is the start of an interaction with a person, not with a website. And it's multi-channel. So they have taken that experience that they could have just built on the web or just built in a mobile app and connected it. So when I start a booking on the website and then I get an email back from the host, it pops into my mobile app. Again, that's an interaction design that is in support of the mission. That communication between people is essential, and that is their differentiator. It's also what makes them mission-driven. Another mission-focused organization is Nike. It's funny, I always thought of Nike as an apparel manufacturer, but they don't say anything about making clothes in this mission. I actually had to copy this right off their site because I love it so very much. Bringing inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. And if you have a body, you are an athlete. I think that is so powerful. But again, you may not be in the position to write this mission statement. You might not even be in the position to make this mission statement and edit on it. What you are in a position to do is to take your organization mission and apply it to your work, apply it to social good. And so one example is the Nike running app. There's a couple key things here. I think that they have embraced approachable and shareable design, which again is something about the mission being for everyone, not just for professional athletes. Their mission also speaks to inspiration. And again, you'll see that here with training tools built into the app. You see that here with community built into the app. The fact that you can get virtually cheered from people in your social networks as you're running, that is inspiration for you, the user. And innovation. Again, you don't think of Nike necessarily as a software company, but they're building really powerful software to help you optimize your life. They're building powerful software that helps you see how you're performing and how you're improving. That is innovation. And so the designers on this, I have to imagine, look at that mission, translate it down a couple layers, and come up with their experience. One more example before we delve into the methods behind this. Evernote. I love Evernote. I think Evernote provides a great service, and I think as they've moved into other domains besides the original cross-platform cloud-based note app, they are still holding true to their mission in everything they design. And so, for instance, you've probably taken notes in a Word document before. You might have had a Word document that lost your notes before. That doesn't happen to me anymore because I use Evernote. And that you can see here, they're building apps and products that are defining the way individuals and teams work. And I think that that is definitely true. And one example that I love is their new scannable app. So their brand new scannable app came out a couple weeks ago. When you have used a scanner in the past, you have to position the document, you have to press a button, often you have to crop the edges, you have to set your settings. And you know what the interaction design in this app said? You know what, we have technology, we don't have to do that. We can instead put the content first. Drop something in front of the camera, have it automatically cropped, have it automatically color corrected, and then offer you suggestions of what you want to do with it. This is, again, defining the way individuals and teams work. You're doing the work for the user. You don't have to let the user do unnecessary work. That is a focus on their mission. And so again, I know this can be seeming very high-minded, so I want to talk about a few specific methods where I think you can introduce value to a mission-driven process. Because not all mission statements are great. In fact, probably the vast majority of them suck. And so I don't want to say that mission statements are the sole source of good for mission-driven design. But there are ways that you can take a goal, a mission, and adapt it to your work. Of course, Agile is a huge revolution in software design over the last decade or so. And we often hear about problems as designers associated with Agile. We hear about too limited scope. We hear about a relentless focus on MVP. But Agile can be a force for good because it allows us to build mission-driven thinking deep into a workflow through an entire team. Most notably, as a designer in a proper Agile environment, you should be working with developers and product owners and stakeholders on a nearly daily basis. If you embrace mission-driven design, this gives you an opportunity to champion it in your organization, to be someone who can say, but wait, can't we do this a different way? And so that importance of framing, importance of building consensus cannot be overstated. Along those same lines, team chartering. Team chartering is something that you are often going to do in an Agile environment. It is the first step when you form a new team, and it's particularly important for mission-driven design. This is your first opportunity to make your impact on the product. Team chartering often looks something like this. You sit down with your team, you talk about what are the mission and objectives, what are the team roles, definition of authority, operations, and logistics, and this kind of sets the ground rules for the team you're working with. The important point here is buy-in. Everyone on your team needs to have a voice. Everyone on your team needs to pull these things together. And this is where that first point, mission and objectives, is where you translate that capital M mission into something your team can execute on. So at this point, you're not talking anymore about we're going to be the best in breed, everything to everyone. You're talking about what that mission, what the goals are, what the objectives are for your project. You can have SMART goals at that point, specific, measurable, time-bound objectives, but they tie directly back up to the mission that you're trying to accomplish. You know what they say about assumptions? That it makes good designers into great designers. At least that's how I've heard it. Thorough documentation is essential. Assumptions are a lean UX practice that are very useful when you're doing mission-driven design. Why? Because it forces you to focus. It forces you to take your mission apart into little digestible chunks and get that purpose agreed to by the team and by your stakeholders. So when you break down that corporate mission and you say, this is how we're applying this mission, and more importantly, this is how we're not applying this mission on this project, that is what you want to do as you're documenting assumptions. Another method that is vitally important to everything, and including mission-driven thinking, is iteration and experiment. It's the hallmark of agile and lean processes. And I think the key here is that you have an opportunity to see if you're measuring the right things for a mission day in and day out. I like to think about this as data-informed design. Do just enough, test it, see what works, and then go back and rebuild. The key here is that you are able to test things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to test in a traditional MVP approach. You're able to test the vision, the mission, in a very actionable way through prototypes. Prototypes are a way that you can actually build something quick and see if it works at a very high level. I'll give you an example. We're looking at how you might improve the long-form listening experience in NPR1. The way that you might do that in an agile way is to just keep iterating little micro improvements. But our mission is such that we can't just do that and have a coherent vision. Our mission to create a more informed public demands that we do design sprints, to do things that are much more long-term that then we can chunk out, then we can have a vision for. Prototypes are a low-cost way to test that mission. It allows you to say this, not this. Mission-driven thinking also impacts your research. So we talk a lot about empirical research and empathetic research. And I think that if you are adhering to your mission, if you're adhering to having people first and the things that you want people to be able to accomplish as a result of your work, that impacts your research plans. Because instead of purely focused on tasks or purely focused on what buttons people press, you're able to embrace the person and understand where they're coming from. And when you're designing your recruiting, you're able to say who this is not for. You know what, we don't want to need to talk to those people right now because that's not who we're on a mission to serve. And the final method, and this one everyone should be familiar with, but I feel like I have to say it, is the 5 whys. The 5 whys have been around for ages. They originally come from work done by the Toyota Motor Corporation to figure out how to improve manufacturing process. They have migrated into software and design. And the key is always making sure that you get to the root cause of what you're trying to solve for. When you're doing mission-driven design, you should be able, with 5 degrees of Kevin Bacon, 5 whys, to be able to get those up to a very high mission-driven statement. So, if you're looking at an app, why is this button blue? Well, because the usability testing showed that the red button didn't show up properly. Okay, but why is it important that that button shows up properly? Well, because users won't be able to use the app effectively if they don't see that button. Well, why is it important that the users be able to use the app effectively? Well, because we want the users to be able to complete their goal of making this purchase. Well, why is it important that the users make that purchase? Well, because that purchase helps the user get what they need to improve their life. Well, why is it important that we improve their life? Well, that is our mission. We want to improve their life through the purchase, an easier purchase of better things. And so you can scaffold up from there. And I want to talk very importantly about this. It's about framing. And framing is equally as important as the work we do with pixels or with pen and paper. So that's how I think about putting mission into action. But of course, it's not just a one-time process. You don't just say, yep, I got the mission, I'm done, next. You have to verify that you're actually meeting your mission. And you have to refine it as a result of ongoing work. So you've unpacked your mission, you've employed it. Now what? What I do is I think of mission like a design problem. So we look at user-centered design, and we go through the plan, research, design, measure, design, adapt, measure process. And I think the same can be true when we look at mission-driven design. We plan by articulating our mission, by expanding it out into actionable nuggets. We research, design, and adapt to employ that mission in our work. And then we measure to see how that mission is impacting the users we want to impact. No matter how gold-plated, no matter how formal your mission statement is, it is a hypothesis. Make no mistake. It is something that will change over time. Now, whether you have the ability to rewrite the mission statement that's plastered on the wall of your company, maybe not, but with concerted design effort and concerted research over time, and concerted selling of that research up the food chain, you can make a positive impact on your organization's direction and mission, and you start at the product level. So what do I mean by that? I'm talking about engagement metrics. When I talk about iteration and experimentation, I consider data-informed design to be essential to this process. And I say data-informed, not data-driven. I think it's very important that we are not slaves to the numbers. There's something to be said for infusing all viewpoints. But I want to make it clear that engagement is what you want to measure here. That does not necessarily mean you want to measure success, business success. You want to measure key performance indicators that are tied directly to your mission. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our business model at NPR. This is one of my favorite quotes that one of my coworkers has said most recently. She's full of quotables, which is that beloved is our business model. What we mean by that, I think I have to do a little deeper dive into NPR finances, just briefly, to show you what I mean. Public radio system as a whole gets the largest share of its funding from individual contributors. That is when you're watching PBS and you hear and viewers like you. That's what that share is, and the same is true for public radio. NPR is in a unique case, though, in that we aren't funded directly by individuals. We are funded primarily by stations. That's that biggest pie up there. So stations pay for our programming that we produce, pay for our services that we render to them. And so this is where the dual purpose of our mission comes into full force. We have to serve our end users, but we also have to make sure we're working effectively with station partners. And so when we say beloved is our business model, we mean that people need to love the content that we're putting out. They need to love the experiences that they're having, because that is what gets them to call up their station and make a pledge. That's what gets them to become a sustaining member. But the key is that we are not just designing for a short term. We're designing for a long-term mission. And so how do you measure this? There's a whole bunch of ways, and I'm not going to say there's one right way for every organization. In fact, there's not one right way even for our organization. You could measure the time that your users are involved with you. You could measure sessions on a website. You could measure which interactions they're taking, assign value to those interactions, tying those interactions back to the specifics of your mission. You could look at a conversion funnel and see how deep are they moving down. Are they having the connection to the brand that we want them to have? You could look at transaction value if you're transaction oriented. And there's probably 80 to 100 other measures that you could put in place. The key is that your key performance indicators should be mission informed. You shouldn't look at any number that you're going to present to a stakeholder, to your bosses, and not be able to explain how that number directly impacts the change that you want to see as a result of your work. This is where you make the biggest impact in your organizations as designers. You are able to take those nuggets, those data points, and sell them. You're able to bring them up your organization and make sure that people understand the individual users who are impacted by the work that you do. And if you're measuring things that aren't connecting to your mission, if you're measuring things that are a little cold, a little sterile, it's an opportunity to reevaluate those key performance indicators. There's one other thing I want to mention, which is your mission, as I said, might not be good. It might not be something that you can change, but it is something you can build on. And one of the things that I've been very excited to see a lot of big organizations doing more and more is publishing design principles. And I see the thread directly connecting design principles to mission. So for me, when you take a high-level mission and you break it down into things that your designers or you can directly act upon, you're extending your mission just without getting someone to approve a sign-off on an upgraded version of your mission statement. And it's something that you can own as a designer or as a design team. So for instance, let's take a look into it. This is a snippet from Intuit's mission statement, and I think it's a pretty good mission. We believe in the people who do things, the hat jugglers, the to-do list junkies, the masters of getting it done faster, better, and more efficiently than before, whether that's balancing the household budget, running a business, or paying taxes. As the world evolves, so do we, inventing new solutions to solve important problems, perfecting those solutions, and delighting our customers. In short, improving people's financial lives so profoundly they can't imagine going back to the old way. It's a great mission, and it's something that designers can work towards. What makes it actionable for their designers are their design principles. So for instance, this is a snippet. There's a whole lot more in their design principles. I strongly encourage you to take a look at them, where they talk about being simple, easy to use, and guiding, and they break it down establishing a familial resemblance, maintaining user context by staying in place. These are specific interaction models that directly tie to mission. Another example, and this is one where the mission is not as clear. IBM, we all know IBM. They do just about everything, and they have a mission that is a little unclear. This is their mission, or what they say it replaces their mission. IBMers value dedication to every client's success, innovation that matters for our company and the world, and trust and personal responsibility in all relationships. Okay, how do you apply that? If you're IBM's design team, you break that out into a very nice design language framework. And this, again, is only a very small part of the very nice design docs that their design team has put together. Does it look like IBM? What does that mean? Does it sound like IBM? What does it mean? Does it think like IBM? And that has incredible amount of bearing on the interaction design that their team does. And does it perform like IBM? And again, there's a lot more that goes into support of this. And this is how they make their mission actionable, through design principles. So, there's a few key things that I want you to leave here today with. First, by identifying and understanding our mission, we infuse our designs with intentionality. And I think that that is the most important thing that any designer can do, is to never put out anything that they're not sure on unless they're intending to test it. And never put out anything that's just copying patterns, because make sure that everything you design adheres to your mission. And an effective mission can be easily built upon and permeates all design activities. This is not something that you're necessarily going to change by changing the mission statement text on your corporate homepage, but it is something that you as a design team can extend based on design principles, based on team chartering, based on the work that you do day in and day out to talk about your mission. And again, your mission is not immutable. You reshape it through the design process. By having mission-inspired key performance indicators, you're able to see the impact of your work, and you're able to talk with stakeholders, to talk with the business about how to improve your organizational and your product mission. And with that, mission accomplished. I think I have a few minutes for questions, if anyone has any. Yeah, yes.
Can you share, you talked about aligning key KPIs with your mission. Can you share some KPIs that you guys use?
Yeah, so I think that that's something we are absolutely still working on. And so part of doing this talk was putting my head around the things that we have done and have yet to do. We have a role called an innovation accountant that's embedded within our digital media team. And what he does is works through funnels and works through our web stats, our usage metrics, and reports that back to the team so that we can make better decisions. So, for instance, with NPR1, we've been very gratified to see amount of average listening time in a week for all of our active users just going up and up and up. And we look at that metric because we think that, obviously the more time you spend with us, the more stories you hear, the better informed you are on an individual level. Likewise, we look at number of users entering the funnel and how they're entering the funnel, because our role is to reach as many people as possible to help them be better informed, and so that's one we're constantly looking at. Yes?
I'm wondering how your design team really interprets this idea of what a more informed public looks like and how you guys define public.
Yeah.
Whether there's any sort of harder questioning that goes into the type of algorithmic bubble informed that you end up creating for that type of
I think that's absolutely a fair question. It's something that public media as a whole always grapples with, is who are we reaching, how are we reaching them? I don't know if any of you do listen to NPR or watch PBS. There's been some conversation lately around the public radio voice. The fact that everyone who's on public radio, by and large, kind of sounds the same, even if they are very diverse in and of themselves. It's the basis of an SNL joke in there, I think. And so it's certainly something, we have internal conversations about who is the public, what is the makeup of the public, how do we reach them? And, it's something we define as a design team on a product-by-product basis. So for instance, we think that our NPR1 audience, we think of them as people who are digital natives. They're people who are going to be maybe have their first experience with NPR through our app, as opposed to our NPR News app, which is probably more serving the audience who traditionally listens to NPR. And so you look at the entire product universe as ways to connect with different audiences and different markets. But it's an open question, to be sure, and something we grapple with every single day. Yes?
I'm curious how you guys stay better informed to more informed. And does more informed necessarily mean better informed?
I think they go together, and given that I work at NPR, I have a strong bias to think that the more we inform you, the better informed you are. But again, that's a good question, and certainly there are people who would debate that point. I think one of the things that we're looking at is how do we not be so insular? How do we connect you not just with the best content that we have as we define it, but also the best content from anything that you might be interested in, both in terms of different subjects, but also different producers, different voices. How can we use the position we have in your life to help you find what you're looking for? Yes?
So one of the most interesting things I've done with the NPR One app is that little microphone that will occasionally ask you, like, if you like this, like, would you like to hear this? Please tell me that you want to do it. And
Yes.
it will give you there. And it's interesting because it's for the first time a dual-way interaction between you and NPR, where traditionally that's always been very much traditional media, coming from the top down. And I was wondering like, how that came about.
Oh, exactly. So the question was in our app we have an interaction, especially on iOS right now, where we can provide a little bit of a taste of something we might play for you and ask you if you want to hear it. And I think that that is something that the team came up with as a solution, because we know that typically you are going to be hands-free with your device. We know that most of our sessions have the screen off. So having a button on screen might have some value, but it doesn't have nearly as much value as being able to have you talk back to us. And so I think that what you're defining, what you're talking about, is the earliest stage of this. We would like the app to be, so responsive to what you've already told us that we actually don't have to do it all that much, because we're already giving you things directly in your flow that we know you're going to love. But there's always the opportunity for us to bridge you into something new. To answer your question about filter bubble, I think that that's something we think about an awful lot, is how do we make sure that you don't self-select into a group that's only hearing news that reinforces your worldview. The way we do it is by making sure that there's enough variety in our programming, and that's where, for us, it's not just an automated algorithm. We program NPR One, the content that goes into NPR One, much the same way we program the radio. It's just augmented by a whole lot of machine learning. And so we make sure that you're not always going to not hear the stories about the world because you skipped a few of them. And I think that those conversational approaches, having a promo that leads into something else, is another tool in our belt that lets us introduce something to you. Even if we're not quite sure you're going to like it, we can tell you about it. Let us tell you just a little bit, and then say if you want it or not. And that's something that's fundamentally different from what we could do on the radio. Yes?
Do you have a story to share where, an instance perhaps where a user need or a design came out that doesn't jive with your mission, and you say like, oh, because of this, we're not going to do it?
I don't have an NPR example to share right now. I think that, and partly this is because I've only been at NPR 6 months, so I'm sure that I will have cases down the road where we're like, oh, how did that happen? Or things that maybe internally we work on, and then through the process, through the conversations that we have on the team, we decide, you know what, this needs some more work before we can release it because it's not living up to our expectations of ourselves. I'm gonna have to think about that one. I'll get back to you on that one. Yes.
Two questions. First, NPR One doesn't do pledge breaks, does it?
It does not right now.
Okay.
I should say, let me phrase, pledge breaks, it does do opportunities for you to donate to your local station. It's just not the same as when you're listening to the radio and you get a long segment of pledge content. That's something, again, that's a balancing act a bit, and something that we're looking at is how do we balance that to make sure that public radio has a future, is supported by listeners, but that we don't give you the 10-minute unskippable pledge drive.
Right. Okay. So the real question is, many of us in the corporate world are burdened with corporate mission statements that are very directly ignoring the customer. Things like we maximize shareholder value for a region or
Yes.
a known brand.
yes.
So, obviously, your advice is to create a local mission statement. How far up the command chain is it necessary to get buy-in on that?
I think that is entirely organizational dependent. I think that some organizations where teams have a great deal of autonomy will be able to do a lot with just convincing their direct boss, their direct stakeholder. I think at very structured organizations, probably the ones that have that sort of mission statement, it's going to be a little bit harder and there's going to be a little bit more selling involved. The good thing I will say is that all of the talk about design thinking and all of the collective consciousness in the executive ranks about the importance of design has made that job a whole lot easier because you're able to go back to your user research and your data, and you're able to come with your product owner and say, hey, look, these are the ways we change people's lives. That's a lot different than just maximizing shareholder value. Hopefully that by changing people's lives, you are maximizing shareholder value in and of itself. I mean, if you're in business, you should be doing the right thing for your user because it's also going to be the right thing for your business. Not always easy, not always easier said than done in some cases. But I think it all depends on the scale of your organization, how far up you have to go. I think we're going to do just one more question so that we can get you guys out to lunch. And before I take that question, because I know people will disperse after that, I want to say just a couple quick things. Number one, there is a really, 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 really quick survey at bit.ly/Newman15. If you could pull out your phone and plug in that URL and take it. It has 3 questions on it and a box for you to put your email address so I can send you the slides. I would really appreciate it. This is the first time I'm rolling out this particular talk, and I would love your feedback about what made sense, what didn't make sense. I can take it. I'm a big boy. Tell me what I can do to make this a more relevant talk for the future. The other thing I would say is that I should give a little plug. NPR is hiring. We're hiring a senior visual product designer, and we're also hiring a senior interaction designer. So if you are looking, or you know someone who is looking, please come and talk to me. And the last thing I would say is if you have anything that I didn't cover and we're not going to get to in a question, come talk to me during the conference. I'm here for the duration. And or email me, tweet me. I'm happy to engage. One more question. Yes?
Not really a question,
Oh.
but I just wanted to know if you would be able to share some of your sources for some of the material, like the design processes.
Yes.
That would be great.
Yeah, I'll make sure that when I put the slides up that I have the annotations in there for that. Any other questions? I'll take one more. Yes?
Just wondering, given the NPR is, as you mentioned, funded primarily by the stations, whether there is any kind of growing conflict in serving the mission of individuals in a situation with apps and website where you can reach out directly to them.
Yep.
And that they're increasingly consuming NPR content.
I think that is...
Of NPR, not the station.
I think that is a very perceptive question and something that we struggle with a whole lot. I think that the key for me is that we don't succeed if the stations don't succeed. This is no different than a franchise model or any other media network. We are linked together no matter what. And so we work really hard in everything we design to keep the stations at the forefront, is particular for those people who already know their station, but also to introduce the station to people who may not. We do believe, over the long, long, long haul, that more people will listen digitally. It's just that's how it's going to go. And so to keep stations being relevant, the relevancy of a station is not their broadcast tower. The relevancy is the local stories. The relevancy is the local people on the ground. And so we bring that into the NPR experiences so that people who don't know their local station are introduced to their local station through us and hopefully go on to have a great relationship with their local station. One other data point I did want to mention on that, we were blown away that when we added the local station automatically, the logo for the local station on the npr.org homepage, that one change alone actually demonstrably increased session time and decreased page depth. Just identifying that this is a local national connection made an impact on our users. So I think extending that out and making the local connection ever more tangible is something we strive for. Thanks, everyone.